just destroyed the whole symbol, the whole statue, so people wouldn't rally around it. And that's the kind of attitude that the Bahrain people are facing.
So moving on to, obviously we got that situation unfolding, being completely ignored by the establishment media in the West, while they'll still crow about the glorious Syrian rebels busy carrying out terrorist attacks again on Saturday. But meanwhile in Yemen, while Hillary Clinton, admits that the US and Al-Qaeda are on the same side in Syria, in Yemen we've got US troops on the ground, again, no congressional authorization, and it's all in the name of fighting Al-Qaeda, even though we're on the same side as Al-Qaeda in Libya and Syria, the best enemies money can buy. And there's a quote here out of the LA Times today. Obama said in 2010 he had, quote, no intention of sending US boots on the ground to Yemen. But Army General David Petraeus, now head of the CIA, offered to secretly put US Special Operations troops in the country, leaked State Department cables show. Then President Saleh rebuffed his proposal, the cables show. And then we had a convenient little Arab Spring in Yemen, and Saleh, who was, proving a roadblock to all this, was outed. He was toast. So, Syrian girl, US troops in Yemen now officially. What's the core objective behind these boots on the ground that Obama promised he would never send?
Well, it's a little bit strange that the US is using Al-Qaeda to in a different way in Syria, and then it's using it in Yemen as a pretext for an invasion. And that might be something that we're going to see them try to do in Syria, although Syria's military is quite strong, so perhaps it won't be an intervention to a level of an invasion. But with Yemen, if you asked what's the importance of it, why are they there? Well, if you look at Yemen geographically, it's right next to the Suez Canal, and it's with an African country called Djibouti. I'm not sure if I pronounced that properly. There's a little bit of a cutoff in that canal. And so Yemen is a very important country for imports and exports to go through for control. So that was one of the reasons that US troops are in there. It's interesting that we never really heard about US troops there until there was a bombing recently where one of these trainers, they're called, was injured in this bombing, although 100 Yemeni soldiers were killed in the bombing as well, due to the CIA terrorist organization Al-Qaeda.
So we've got that situation unfolding again, another domino they're trying to topple there in the Middle East. I want to focus it back on Syria again. Because, when the Arab League went into Syria and reported there was violence on both sides, the Western establishment media couldn't care less. So then we had the oh-so-independent UN, who have now gone in as observers. And we learn from the photographic and video evidence that they're palling around with Al-Qaeda, those same, bad guys that were in Yemen to fight, and actually under protection in this independent mission, under protection of the rebels. So given that, Syrian girl, how independent do you think the UN mission in Syria really is?
It's never been independent. We've seen the UN, being used as a tool to create wars for a long time now. And I think the whole point of the UN ceasefire is just to give the rebels a chance to regroup and rearm, because it came the ceasefire was suggested at a time when they suffered a huge defeat in Bab Amr, which is a district in Homs, where they had a stronghold, and the military of the Syrian military actually went into it. So quickly then we saw this diplomatic overtures from the UN and NATO to try to salvage whatever is left of this sectarian insurgency. And this is what the ceasefire has been used as, it could have been worse if it wasn't for the Russian changes in the peace plan. But of course, it was going to fail from the start because the insurgents themselves failed to agree to it, and they continued their offensive. Only the Syrian military had its hands tied behind its back by the ceasefire and couldn't attack the insurgency to the full. So that's really the point of the whole thing. And it's funny to assume that the NATO side is wanting to see the ceasefire succeed, because as it was going, what has happened in Syria, the international EU and NATO has increased sanctions against Syria, and they have openly declared monetary funding and non-weapon aid to the rebels, although Syria and the Lebanese military has been capturing weapons shipments, huge ones, over the last few months since the ceasefire was declared. So it's obvious that at least the EU and NATO have no intention for there to be peace or a ceasefire, and they're actively undermining the so-called ceasefire.
Well, a lot of people say it's just a holding pattern to get the rebels organized, because we now know that the arms are flowing in, funded by the US, of course, and the talk is that observer mission is merely a stopgap until they can get those rebel brigades organized for a proper offensive, but we shall see. Sticking with Syria, though, another topic I find fascinating, because it directly relates to some of the stuff we put out, is our friend Syria Danny. Because isn't it interesting how almost immediately after that embarrassing performance on CNN's Anderson Cooper, himself a former CIA agent, completely harmless, I presume, completely failed to defend his role in staging war propaganda, this Syria Danny, after he was caught doing so on video. And Syrian Girl, isn't it the case that he's basically now disappeared almost completely after being exposed as basically a war propagandist?
Yes, they have no more use for him, as he's been debunked and exposed by none other than INFOWARS. And the video of him forging the interview existed for 2 weeks on the internet, and nobody picked up the story except for INFOWARS. And only once they did was Anderson Cooper forced to basically distance himself from Danny with this botched whitewash that they attempted on their show. So unfortunately, though, there's continuing disinformation coming out from the media, if not with the use of this Danny. There's plenty of other people to buy off, and there's been a recent piece of information that from the FSA that they killed 6 Syrian officials. And Al Jazeera picks this up, and then other media have picked it up. And in fact, all of those government officials came out and said they're alive. So the lies continue, and I don't think we've seen the end of them.
Here's a common question, but it's one I'm going to ask. What do you say to people who say, well, this Syrian girl is just being paid by the Assad regime to propagandize and cover up the fact that his government's killed 10,000 people?
Well, I think that it's just an easy way to put aside everything I say and delegitimize it, when it's obvious that I've stood clearly in my position that I have always been a patriotic opposition to the government. I have no links at all to the Ba'ath Party, and these allegations, they're just a way to tarnish someone's image and someone's name by people who don't like what I'm saying. And I wonder who benefits least from what I'm saying. And, they would have something to gain from claiming that I'm somehow linked to the Syrian government.
Well, you know, I guess we've got the entirety of the Western establishment media pushing the line that these glorious rebels are in fact freedom fighters when they're carrying out terrorist attacks on a weekly basis. So I guess that angle's covered. Well, actually, another story I read in the Financial Times a few days ago was written by Anne-Marie Slaughter, who is a CFR member. And she was basically saying, look, we've reached an impasse with the Syria situation. Nothing much is happening. They haven't, you know, overthrown the regime as soon as they wanted. She said, let's arm the citizens with smartphones and facilitate them the ability to upload abuse videos to a centralized UN hub. So they're actually proposing going in there, arming people with cameras and cell phones and saying, you can go and upload, you know, your Syria Danny style propaganda videos to our UN hub. Does that sound open to abuse or what?
I think it's pretty strange because that already happened. Most of the insurgents are armed with high-powered cameras, and I have video evidence of this because they all pulled them out when the UN monitors were present. And, you know, smartphones exist in Syria already, so what you're saying is a bit ludicrous and outdated because this has already been happening since the beginning. And of course, it's being abused. And, you know, these Al Jazeera and CNN and BBC and France 24, they love this one-sided view from a shaky camera that nobody can really tell what happened or who shot who, because then they can make whatever they want out of it. And I think it's clear that after such time has passed, where the Syrian people stand, you know, there's not been any mass rallies in the street to the level that we saw in Egypt. So if she wants to know what Syrian opinion is, she only needs to look at that.
Okay, is there any, tell people how they can get your material. I believe it's mainly on YouTube, isn't it?
Yes, I have a Twitter account also. It's Partisan Girl, and I also have a YouTube. And I just wanted to say one last thing because I was asked to by some Syrian compatriots that live in Sydney, Australia, that they've been attacked by sectarian forces that have burnt down their mosque, which is an Alawite mosque. So I just wanted to say that the sectarian tone of this insurgency is just increasing. And thank you for this interview.
Okay, we'll continue to watch developments in Syria and the Middle East as a whole with interest. Syrian Girl, thanks for joining us on INFOWARS Nightly News.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for this edition of INFOWARS Nightly News. We will see you on tomorrow night's show. Again, I urge you to subscribe at PRISONPLANET.tv, but that's going to wrap it up for today. Thank you.